Good evening and welcome to this edition of the Legends of the Smooth Jazz. It is episode 5 on this Saturday night, February 4th, 2023. I'm your host, Jason DeCanio, and welcome to this great show that has now over 135 views with just 4 episodes. The Buddy Rich episode, fantastic. Thank you for your continued support. As tonight now we're going to be looking at an American jazz vibraphonist, pianist, percussionist, and bandleader who worked with jazz musicians from Teddy Wilson, Benny Goodman, and Buddy Rich to Charlie Parker, Charles Mingus, and Quincy Jones. And then he was inducted into the Alabama Jazz Hall of Fame in 1992, and he was awarded the National Medal of Arts in 1996. Who we're talking about tonight? Lionel Hampton, the vibraphonist, with it all, right here on the Legends of Smooth Jazz. Okay, let's get started on Lionel Hampton's legacy. Your host, Jason DeCanio, for this episode 5. It's the weekend of February 4th, 2023, and we're 10 days away from Valentine's Day. So I hope you're getting prepared for that, and we hope that tonight you will get a treat as we look at Lionel Hampton's great legacy life right here on the program. All right. Well, Lionel Hampton was born in 1908 in Louisville, Kentucky, and was raised by his mother. Shortly after he was born, he and his mother moved to her hometown of Birmingham, Alabama. He spent his early childhood in Kenosha, Wisconsin, before he and his family moved to Chicago, Illinois in 1916. And as a youth, Hampton was a member of the Bud Billiken Club, an alternative to the Boy Scouts of America, which was off limits because of racial segregation. During the 1920s, while still a teenager, Hampton took xylophone lessons from Jimmy Bertrand and began to play drums. Hampton was raised Catholic and started out playing fife and drum at the Holy Rosary Academy near Chicago. He began his career playing drums for the Chicago Defender Newsboys Band, led by Major N. Clark Smith, while still a teenager in Chicago. And while he lived in Chicago, Hampton saw Louis Armstrong at the Vendome, recalling that the entire audience went crazy after his first solo. He moved to California in 1927 or 1928, playing drums for the Dixieland Blues Blowers. He made his recording debut with the Quality Serenaders, led by Paul Howard, and then left for Culver City and drummed for the Les Height Band at Sebastian's Cotton Club. One of his trademarks as a drummer was his ability to do stunts with multiple pairs of sticks, such as twirling and juggling without missing a beat. And during this period, he began practicing on the vibraphone. In 1930, Louis Armstrong came to California and hired the Les Height Band for performances and recordings. Armstrong was impressed with Hampton's playing after Hampton reproduced Armstrong's solo on the vibraphone and asked him to play behind him like that during vocal choruses. So began his career as a vibraphonist, popularizing the use of the instrument in the process. Invented 10 years earlier, the vibraphone is essentially a xylophone with metal bars, a sustain pedal, and resonators equipped with electric-powered fans that add tremolo. Now, while working with the Les Height Band, Hampton also occasionally did some performing with Nat Shilkret and his orchestra. During the early 1930s, he studied music at the University of Southern California, and in 1934 he led his own orchestra and then appeared in the Bing Crosby film Pennies from Heaven alongside Louis Armstrong wearing a mask in a scene while playing drums in 1936. Also in November of 36, the Benny Goodman Orchestra came to Los Angeles to play the Palomar Ballroom. And when John Hammond brought Goodman to see Hampton perform, Goodman invited him to join his trio, which soon became the Benny Goodman Quartet, with pianist Teddy Wilson and drummer Gene Krupa completing the lineup. The trio and quartet were among the first racially integrated jazz groups to perform before audiences, and were a leading small group of the day. During his nearly 4 years with Goodman, Hampton became a household name in the swing world, not only adding fire, color, and inventive ideas to Goodman's quartet, and occasionally filling in on drums with the big band, but staying long enough to be one of the stars at Goodman's famed Carnegie Hall concert in 1938, and to be part of the clarinetist Nestitz Sextet with the pioneering electric guitarist Charlie Christian. At the same time, Hampton led a series of mostly superb all-star sessions for the Victor label. Now, while Hampton worked for Goodman in New York, he recorded with several different small groups known as the Lionel Hampton Orchestra, as well as assorted small groups within the Goodman Band. In 1940, Hampton left the Goodman organization under amicable circumstances to form his own big band. Hampton's orchestra developed a high profile during the 1940s and early 50s. His third recording with them in 1942 produced the version of Flying Home, featuring a solo by Illinois' Jacques that anticipated rhythm and blues. And although Hampton first recorded Flying Home under his own name with a small group in 1940 for Victor, the best-known version is the big band version recorded for Decca on May 26, 1942, in a new arrangement by Hampton's pianist Milt Buckner. The 78 RPM disc became successful enough for Hampton to record Flyin' Home No. 2 in 1944, this time a feature for Arnett Cobb. The song went on to become the theme song for All Three Men. Guitarist Billy Mackerel, or Macca Mackel, first joined Hampton in 1944 and would perform and record with him almost continuously through to the late 1970s. In 1947, Hamp performed Stardust at a Just Jazz concert for producer Gene Norman, also featuring Charlie Shavers and Slam Stewart. The recording was issued by Decca, and later Norman's GNP Crescendo label issued the remaining tracks from the concert. Hampton was a featured artist at numerous cavalcade of jazz concerts held at Wrigley Field in Los Angeles, and produced by Leon Heflin Sr. His first performance was at the second Cavalcade of Jazz concert, held on October 12, 1946, and also featured Jack McVeigh, Slim Galliard, T-Bone Walker, the Honey Drippers, and Louis Armstrong. The fifth Cavalcade of Jazz concert was held in two locations, Wrigley Field in Los Angeles and Lane Field in San Diego, on July 10, 1949, and September 3, 1949, respectively. Betty Carter, Jimmy Witherspoon, Buddy Banks, Smiley Turner, and Big J. McNeely also played with Hampton. It was at the sixth Cavalcade of Jazz, on June 25, 1950, that Hampton's playing precipitated the closest thing to a riot in the show's eventful history. Lionel and his band paraded around the ballpark's infield playing Flying High, and the huge crowd, around 14,000, went berserk, tossed cushions, coats, hats, programs, and just about anything else they could lay hands on, and swarmed on the field. Dinah Washington, Roy Milton, Pee Wee Creighton, Lily Greenwood, Tiny Davis, and her Helldivers, they were also featured. His final Cavalcade of Jazz concert, held on July 24th of 1955, that would be the 11th, also featured Big J. McNeely, the Medallions, the Penguins, and James Moody and his orchestra. From the mid-1940s until the early 1950s, Hampton led a lively rhythm and blues band whose Decca Records recordings included numerous young performers who later had significant careers. They included bassist Charlie Mingus, saxophonist Johnny Griffin, guitarist Wes Montgomery, vocalist Diana Washington, and vocal stylist Little Jimmy Scott. Other noteworthy band members were trumpeters Dizzy Gillespie, Cat Anderson, Kenny Dorham, and Snooky Young, trombonist Jimmy Cleveland, and saxophonists Jerome Richardson and Curtis Lowe. The Hampton Orchestra that toured Europe in 1953 included Clifford Brown, Gigi Grice, Anthony Ortega, Monk Montgomery, George Wallington, Art Farmer, Quincy Jones, and singer Annie Ross. Hampton continued to record with small groups and jam sessions during the 40s and 50s with Oscar Peterson, Buddy DeFranco, and others. In 1955, while in California working on the Benny Goodman story, he recorded with Stan Getz and made 2 albums with Art Tatum for Norman Granz, as well as with his own big band. Hampton performed with Louis Armstrong and Italian singer Laura St. Paul at the 1968 San Remo Music Festival in Italy. The performance created a sensation with Italian audiences as it broke into a real jazz session. That same year, Hampton received a papal medal from Pope Paul VI. During the 60s, Hampton's groups were in decline. He was still performing what had succeeded for him earlier in his career. He did not fare much better in the 70s, though he recorded actively for his Who's Who in Jazz record label, which he founded in the 77 to 78 season. Beginning in February of 1984, Hampton and his band played at the University of Idaho's annual jazz festival, which was renamed the Lionel Hampton Jazz Festival the following year. In 1987, the UI's School of Music was renamed for Hampton, the first university music school named for a jazz musician. That's the University of Idaho. And during much of the 80s, some notable sidemen in Hampton's orchestra included Thomas Chapin, Paul Jeffrey, Frankie Dunlop, Arvell Shaw, John Coliani, Oliver Jackson, and George Duvivier. Hampton remained active until his stroke in Paris in 1991 led to a collapse on stage. That incident, combined with years of chronic arthritis, forced him to cut back drastically on performances. However, he did play at the Smithsonian National Museum of American History in 2001, shortly before his death. He died from congestive heart failure at Mount Sinai Hospital, New York City, on August 31, 2002. He was interred at the Woodlawn Cemetery, Bronx, New York. His funeral was held on September 7, 2002, and featured a performance by Wynton Marsalis and Dave Ostwald's Gully Low Jazz Band at Riverside Church in Manhattan. The procession began at the Cotton Club in Harlem. Well, November 11, 1936, in Yuma, Arizona, Lionel Hampton married Gladys Riddle, and Gladys was Lionel's business manager throughout much of his career. Many musicians recall that Lionel ran the music and Gladys ran the business. Around 45 or 46, he handed a pair of vibraphone mallets to then 5-year-old, later jazz musician Roy Ayers. And during the 1950s, he had a strong interest in Judaism and raised money for Israel. In 1953, he composed a King David suite and performed it in Israel with the Boston Pops Orchestra. Later in life, Hampton became a Christian Scientist. Hampton was also a 33rd degree Prince Hall Freemason. In January of 1997, his apartment caught fire and destroyed his awards and belongings. Hampton escaped uninjured. Hampton was deeply involved in the construction of various public housing projects and founded the Lionel Hampton Development Corporation. Construction began with the Lionel Hampton houses in Harlem, New York, in the 60s with the help of then-Republican Governor Nelson Rockefeller. Hampton's wife, Gladys Hampton, also was involved in construction of a housing project in her name, the Gladys Hampton Houses. But Gladys died in 1971. But in the 80s, Hampton built another housing project called Hampton Hills in Newark. Hampton was a staunch Republican and served as a delegate to several Republican national conventions. He served as vice chairman of the New York Republican County Committee for some years, and also was a member of the New York City Human Rights Commission. He served as director of special events for Gerald Ford's 1976 re-election camp, and he donated almost $300,000 to Republican campaigns and committees throughout his lifetime. However, in 1996, he endorsed Clinton and Gore, saying that the Republican Party, which he had joined because it was the party of Lincoln, no longer represented moderates like himself. He's also got a ton of awards. His discography, real good. Goes all the way back. Then the other compilations, his filmography, and all the other good things that make Lionel Hampton a legacy of his own right. And we thank him for his wonderful years from 1927 until his death in 2002. We'll miss you, Lionel Hampton. Your music will continue to inspire those who want to play percussion, including myself, for many more decades and centuries to come. Next week on the program, which will be February 11th, this Saturday coming up, we're going to be looking at, if I can put it in perspective. All right, we didn't. Okay, so we've got that ready to go. All right, so our next person who we're going to be looking at is the man who pretty much made the horn his lifestyle. And I'm talking about the American jazz trumpeter and singer from 1901 to 1971, Louis Daniel Armstrong, nicknamed Satchmo, Satch and Pops, the American trumpeter and vocalist. We'll look at his wonderful legacy next week on the Legends of Smooth Jazz. I'm Jason Icanio, thanking you very much for this great episode. We hope that you enjoyed it. We hope that you will look at and continue to support the YouTube channel. If you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel, please do so. We only have 5 subscribers, but we would like you to be part of that great lineup of family, and we hope that you will join us. The views are coming in, which are great. The 3-part series on Miles Davis, still a success, but Buddy Rich right now takes the cake at well over 100 views, and we are proud of that. So we hope that this Lionel Hampton episode will top that and continue to top every episode from there. We'll see you next week for episode 6. Remember, be honest, be real, keep it simple, stupid, kiss. We'll see you next time on the Legends of Smooth Jazz. Have a great night. Bye for now.
Don't forget to subscribe to the David3000 Network for great more content like this one.